Welcome to Friends and Fiction. 4 New York Times bestselling authors, endless stories. Novelists Mary Kay Andrews, Kristin Harmel, Kristy Woodson Harvey, and Patti Callahan Henry are 4 longtime friends with more than 70 published books between them. Together, they host Friends and Fiction, with author interviews and fascinating insider talk about publishing and writing, to highlight and support independent bookstores. They discuss the books they've written, the books they're reading now, and the art of storytelling. If you love books and you're curious about the writing world, you're in the right place.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Friends and Fiction Show. I am Patti Callahan Henry.
I'm Kristy Woodson Harvey.
And this is Friends and Fiction. 4 New York Times bestselling authors, endless stories to support independent bookstores, authors, librarians, and readers like you. On this week's show, Kristy and I are thrilled to welcome Sunny Hostin to discuss her newest novel, the third in a trilogy, called Summer on Highland Beach. The book was just released, and we are really thrilled to talk about it.
We are, but first we have just a quick reminder to check out all the fun things going on in our Friends and Fiction community over on friendsandfiction.com.
It is there that you'll find, it's a brand new spanking new website, by the way.
It's so pretty. If you
Very
haven't
shiny. Yes. And very easy to navigate. So you'll find our show schedule and see all the other people coming up, details on in-person events, and links to our bookshop.org page where you'll find Sunny's book, the Friends and Fiction official book club with Brenda and Lisa, our merch store, our book subscription box, which is a do not miss with Kristy and Mary Kay's book, and our weekly email newsletter sign up. In other words, if you want to know more about us, if you want to know anything Friends and Fiction and see what we offer, which is a ton, you can go check it out at friendsandfiction.com.
And speaking of things we offer, don't forget about our Friends and Fiction signed book bundle. We only have a few of these left. So as you may know, both Mary Kay and I both have brand new hardcovers out this summer. So if you order the bundle from our friends Oxford Exchange, you'll get hand-signed first editions of both books as they're released and some cool exclusive Friends and Fiction swag for just $60, which is a steal. You can even add on the new paperback editions of Patti's The Secret Book of Flora Lee and Kristin's The Paris Daughter. And those will come signed as well. It makes a great gift for friends who love to read, and even if that friend is you.
Asking for a friend, right?
Yeah.
All right. Remember that Mary Kay's new novel, Summers at the Saint, is already out, and Kristy's A Happier Life, which I've read and adored, is out on June 25th.
Yay. And we've got another live event coming up in St. Louis. We will all be together in person again on Friday, June 28th to celebrate my launch. Man, that is coming up quick. So find the details and ticketing link on my website.
Okay. Now, speaking of great releases, we're excited to talk about our friend, Sunny Hostin. She is an attorney and a multi-platform journalist. I was going to list them all, but you can go look. She is the ABC News legal analyst and co-host of ABC Daytime's morning show, The View.
Previously, Sunny was a legal analyst for CNN, where she became known for her in-depth analysis of social justice and legal issues.
Sunny has covered many of the major legal and political stories of today and has published too many to list popular and scholarly articles. She is a highly sought after public speaker known for her lively and engaging speaking style at all kinds of events. And so we are thrilled that she's going to talk to us.
Mm-hmm. As a federal prosecutor, she was awarded with a Special Achievement Award by then Attorney General Janet Reno for her prosecution of child sexual predators and work with child sex abuse.
It's amazing. She received her undergraduate degree in communications from Binghamton University and her law degree from Notre Dame Law School. A native of New York, she lives with her husband and 2 children in New York. Her newest novel, Summer on Highland Beach, the third in her Summer Beach series, was just released. Sean, we're going to quit talking about her. We're going to talk to her. So could you bring her on for us?
Yay.
Hi, Sunny. Welcome.
I want all the swag you were talking about. That sounded amazing.
Make that happen.
I think we have friends in low places and we can get that for you.
The merch committee is right here, and I can get that. You're right.
on all your success in your book. This is like my book nerd is coming out. This is amazing.
Yeah, welcome to the club, my friend.
Yeah.
All right. So this is the third book in your summer
Yeah.
series. In this newest installment, we get to visit, it's so beautiful. We get to visit Highland Beach along the Chesapeake Bay, the oldest Black resort community in America. Founded in the late 1800s by Frederick Douglass, it is here that Olivia Jones, who we meet again in the third book, comes face to face with her very complicated, to say the least, family legacy. There are secrets of her aunt's death, a controlling grandmother who's determined to crush anyone or anything that will interfere with her son's or any mailbox, who will get in the way of her son's political career, and a father who wants to rebuild the family he rejected decades ago. We are along for such a ride with this one. So, Sunny, if that is what Summer on Highland Beach is about, what would you add to that? And a friend's fiction favorite, what would you say it's really about?
Oh, that's a great question. You know, I certainly think that it is about all of those things you mentioned. I think it's also about finding one's worth and value. I think it's about finding love, finding community. And it's also about self-discovery, right? Because I often think the journey is really interesting. And as women, our journeys are really complex and really interesting. And I think it's also about the fact that there are historically Black beach communities that have existed since the 1800s that so many people don't know. It's a part of American history that no one knows about. It's actually a federal designation, much like an HBCU, historically Black college and university. So it's about the location as well. Because in Highland Beach, as in many of my books, you have historical fiction. This is a real place, really founded by Frederick Douglass and his son, and a place where I think the greatest orator in our history, or one of the greatest in our history, found refuge, right? And safety from sort of the scourge of racism that was swirling around him. And he was such a visionary in terms of understanding social justice and social equity. It's wonderful to me to be able to teach people that he really had a special place, a sacred place where he could rest while he was making such incredible change in our country and in our world. And so it's a little bit more than Olivia's journey. Yeah. I hope that readers will take stock within themselves and go on their own discovery journeys.
All right. Take a journey in this one, that's for sure.
I love that. That's incredible. And you're right. I mean, you really are shedding light on something that, I mean, I didn't know about. I did not know until, so, I mean, I think that's incredible, the way that you're opening people's eyes to this. So along that line, we love to know where ideas come from, and the wide array of authors that we talk to, we are sometimes surprised where their ideas come from. So, and we know as writers, sometimes we don't know. Sometimes it just comes to us, which is a gift that we hope we never lose, right? So is there anywhere that you can point to, like maybe the first seed or the first spark of the idea for Summer on Highland Beach?
I do. I remember it really clearly, actually.
I'm so glad we asked them.
Yeah, I remember really clearly. I was, as you mentioned in the intro, I've reported on a lot of social justice issues, and my work as a federal prosecutor really centered survivors of child sexual abuse. And when I'm reporting and covering these types of stories, I really need a getaway. And I love to read. I read like 5 books at a time. And so, which drives my husband crazy, but I like to read a lot of different things and it's almost like starting a series on Netflix and then stopping it and starting something else on Prime. And I do it that way. And I always buy books at the airport because I'm usually flying to report on something that's pretty sad, generally, and pretty complex. And I remember walking through the airport, stopping at the bookstore and looking for a beach read because it's one of my favorite genres, because it's a getaway, right? It's a vacation in your head. And I was looking in particular for a beach read centering women and women of color. And, I was sort of looking around, and I didn't see anything like that. And I thought, wow, I can't be the only one that wants to read something like this. Like, this is so strange. And I had just been making plans to summer on Oak Bluffs, to summer on Martha's Vineyard. And I didn't buy anything, got on the plane and started sketching out what a beach read about the places that I love the most and where I get my release from, what that would look like. And it was about 3 pages, actually. And I sent it to my literary agent, or really my television agent, who then sent it to a literary agent who's still my wonderful literary agent. And he said, "There's a book here." And I haven't read it. And he's read everything, this guy. This is like 50 years. And he said, "Let's do it." And that's really what started it. It was, I wanted to read something that didn't exist.
Yeah.
And I figured other people would want to read it too.
That's so cool.
I love that you can point to it, because sometimes we can't, right? Sometimes it's just, a lot of times it's about 6 different things that end up in that big pot in the back of your mind.
Yes, I know.
You do that, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. But I want to.
It's so interesting too, like when you have that kind of deep inner knowing and you go for it, and like the things that happen, it's just like a lesson that, okay, you had that moment, and you easily could have been like, what am I doing? I'm so busy. I have a million other things to do. I'm not going to take on this too. But you didn't. You did it anyway.
I did.
You did it. Okay, I want to touch back to Highland Beach for a minute.
Sure.
Because I want to talk about this community as well as visit it. You open this book with a letter explaining how special it is. You call it a place just for us, a place where Booker T. Washington and Du Bois once hung out. Like you said, it was founded in the late 1800s and is the oldest Black resort community. Inside this secluded beach community, I think you said there's 100 homes, private homes.
Yes, yeah.
Okay. So tell us more about it and why you took Olivia here. What was it about this community that you said, I've heard why it's special to you and to Frederick Douglass, but tell us more about it and why you brought Olivia there.
Sag Harbor was a lot about how the community was changing and how people were pushing out families from this refuge, from this historic community. This is about a community, and what attracted me to Highland Beach in particular, this is a community that has really maintained their homes, their legacy, its generational wealth in a way that sometimes you do not see in the African American community, right? And what's fascinating to me is my friend Erica, her family had a home and has a home on Highland Beach, and she inherited that home. I had lived in Maryland for 10 years, and so I visited her there. And it struck me that there are no, rental homes. Yeah. There are no for sale signs outside. There are no hotels there. There are no restaurants there. You have to drive about half an hour away to go to a restaurant. You have to drive around half an hour away to, get a hotel room, 20 minutes away to go food shopping. It's really fascinating. It's this little hamlet. And I started asking questions, and she said, "We don't like visitors, actually. These are families that have grown up together for centuries." Wow. And I was stunned by it in a way. I was so stunned that it existed, that I didn't know about it. And then she explained to me that Frederick Douglass's home had been there. There's a street named, Douglas Street. And she said, we've turned it into a museum. Would you like to go peek at it? And I am one of those travelers that doesn't just sit on the beach and have my tequila, even though I do love that. I'm a traveler that likes the beach, but then I go to the museum like sometimes during the day. And so I wanted to go to the museum, and it was so incredible to see his typewriter, photographs of his family, china, it was, his home. It was just turned into a museum, an homage to his work. His writings are there, pictures of his wives. It was just, I was almost overwhelmed, and I wanted to share the secret. I will tell you, they may not really want a lot of people visiting. I'm sure they want people to
ask, yeah.
visit. But it really has remained a very special and unique place. And I had never seen anything like it. And so I knew very early on that I would write about the Bluffs, Martha's Vineyard, because I summer there every year. I would write about Sag Harbor. I summer there every year. But I would write about Highland Beach, because this was the one book that I felt people would think, I've never heard of this story. And it's so magnificent because it stars Frederick Douglass.
I know. And even in the book, you talk about how if a house goes up for sale, everybody's in on whether people can buy it or not. Like they're very protective.
They're very protective. And, I think some people would see that as, oh, I'm being exclusive, or I'm
protective.
Holy. They're being protective over this community that was so very special to Frederick Douglass and his descendants, as well as the descendants of all those folks that really founded and fought for this community. It's really, I've never seen anything quite like it, actually.
It's very touching. It's very touching.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's lovely.
Okay, so I want to talk more about these fascinating characters that we meet in the book. So let's meet them. So let's say that Patti and I are at a dinner party with Sunny. Let's do that. That sounds good. But you, Sunny, you're going to introduce us to Olivia kind of before she arrives. So she longs to know her newly discovered father. And how would you describe her?
I would say my friend Olivia is coming. Her bark is much bigger than her bite.
I love it.
She's a little bit difficult to get close to, but that is because of her history, and maybe she'll share that, and maybe she won't. But that's her story to tell, so I won't say that. But she's a lovely, lovely person, and she's in a phase of self-discovery. And I'm sure once you get to know her, you'll love her.
I love that you're playing the game. Okay, keep going. That's awesome.
Okay. So CJ, Olivia's father, is the one that tells us we've got some of the brightest minds living here, descended from exceptional people. So how would we meet him? How would you describe him?
I would say to you, the mayor of Highland Beach is coming to dinner.
Okay.
He's absolutely fantastic. He's extremely good looking. He is somewhat guarded, but he loves his community. He works hard for his community. He will probably talk your ear off about his community. Please, welcome him. He is extremely charming, but he can be guarded because he also has some secrets in his background, and he lives a life of regret. So please show him some grace.
You're
like that.
I love it.
Okay, so then there's
skills, because it's true.
The long lost grandmother. And Patti and I have heard that she said you must be in a certain tax bracket to be important to her. Sunny, do you think that is fair or accurate?
It could be accurate about Kristin. I would basically say, have someone coming to dinner. She may slightly offend you at times. Slightly. Sort of speaks her mind. She's a force and has been a force for a long time. Some people love her. Some people hate her. She doesn't really care. She pretends not to care, but I think she does. And so I look forward to the conversation that you will have with her, because it's likely to be quite spicy.
Oh my God. I love it. I love it. All right. When we open this book, by the end of chapter 1, we know we're on Olivia's team. I mean, we know. And there's such nosy neighbors and such a small town and such a complicated family. How, Sunny, did you keep it all straight so that we're hooked and along for the ride by page 2? In other words, talk to us about your writing process. Do you plan?
Yeah.
Are you a pantser? What is your process?
This one was different for me. When I first started writing, my first book was a memoir that I dictated. It was about my life. And so, they say, memoirs may not be factual, but they are truthful. Yeah. And so you're just telling your truth as you remember it. The first fiction book that I wrote, Summer on the Bluffs, I didn't have a method. I was just up late at night. I usually write at night. I write after my children are asleep, or my husband, who's a surgeon, he gets up really, really early. I'm a night owl. He is not. He's up at the crack of dawn, even earlier sometimes, unfortunately. And so I wait till the house is still and the house is quiet. And I usually have a cup of tea and I just start writing. And I really didn't even have the chapters outlined. I just had the characters. I knew who these people were. I remember telling my editor, Carrie Farron, am I weird? I'm like hearing their voices. Like, I know what they sound like. And she was like, no, you're just a writer. You're just a writer. And so I just, the first book I just kind of wrote, and I found them along the way. I found the story along the way. The second book, I was really directed by my readers. They wanted to hear more about Olivia. Some readers felt that Olivia got cheated. My book tour was largely virtual book tour with a lot of book clubs because it was during COVID. Yeah. And so I got instant feedback. People were like,
in your face.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah. And so I took a lot of notes. And so I had a lot more structure for the second book. I had my chapters, I had my characters, I had sort of the journey that I thought she would take. And then, as you know, as writers, it kind of changes along the way, but I sort of had a map. This book, I really also did it that way, but it took so many turns in my mind as I was writing that I had to start. I always have a storyboard with pictures of what I think the characters look like, and I carried them on. But this time I had like storylines, like Highland Beach in 1991, Highland Beach present day, Highland Beach 1800s, because there are time shifts as well.
Yeah.
And so I found, and this is the book that has the most time shifts. And so I had to write it differently to keep up with myself. Like my mind was racing actually during this book, and my writing this book, and my heart was kind of pounding. I wanted so much to get it right. And when I finally handed it to my husband, who is usually my first reader, believe it or not, some people's marriages, I'm sure, would break up over it because he's my fiercest critic, but my staunchest supporter. He read it and he said, "This is the best one." And I was like, handing it in, done.
That's awesome.
And so that's really my process. And for my first book, I actually sort of had a writer's room. I had my friends, because I wrote a lot about my friends in the first book. Some of the characters are based on real people. And I had them every 5 chapters kind of come around a table with a lot of wine and a lot of food, and we would read it out loud.
Oh my gosh, I love that.
It was really great for me because I had men and women, because men read these books as well. And I wanted to get their voices right. And I even had some of my friends say, I know that's me. I know that I did that. I was the one that was drunk at the party and fell on the beach. Can you not include that? I did include it anyway. But, we sort of went around the table and read it out loud. And they really also kind of helped with the sex scenes because, I'm writing from a woman's point of view. And I'm like a repressed Catholic, I'm a Catholic schoolgirl, and I was having a lot of trouble writing them. And I had my male friends and my female friends and red wine. And it was just wonderful
That's amazing.
Help me write. So I did that for my second book as well. I didn't do it for my third book. But I had that process for my first and my second. Actually.
That is amazing. I've never heard anybody do that unless they're writing nonfiction. And that is so much fun.
That's very cool.
That's really fun. Okay.
I want to do that.
Without spoilers, I'm not going to talk about how it would end, even if it did make tears spring to my eyes. Did you know how it was going to end?
I did.
Okay.
I actually wanted Olivia to have a full circle moment. I wanted her to have the full circle moment.
It was beautiful.
Yeah, thank you. I knew my readers wanted it as well.
Yep.
Thank you, readers, because like hundreds, if not thousands of you reached out to me, which is wonderful. This has been a very interactive process for me. And I know that she needed that. What's now hard for me is that I sort of thought I tied it up in a bow. And my husband just says to me the other day, he's like, well, you gotta continue writing about the beach communities. Cause I've also received like 15, I think it's 17 now, additional beach communities that I knew nothing about. Yeah, I knew nothing about them. And I haven't visited all of them. I visited one actually in Virginia. So I don't know. I thought that I had kind of, you know, given it what I think it deserves, but who knows? I
That's
just don't even
creative
know.
life, Sonny. What we believe to be true and what our muse tells us later are
Yeah,
rarely the same thing.
yeah, I'm finding that out.
It is interesting too when I've written a series, and it's interesting when you're doing a series because I think people do feel more like they want to chime in and tell you like what needs to happen in the next book. And I remember doing like a fourth book in a series, and my editor's
Yes.
like, "I don't think you need the secondary character," and I was like, "Would you like to see the emails from all the people
Exactly.
that like if he's not in this book, they're not reading it?" And she was like, "I am
Yes.
wrong." Okay, like it becomes like writing by committee.
It's writing by committee. It's really crazy because for me, the scene, the house, home, the theme of home is very important to me. As a mother and a wife, and as a daughter, my home tends to be the center of our family. I do all the Thanksgivings and all the Christmas Eves and all of that, and all the cooking. So I really wanted to do, I wanted to set things in the home. And so I thought that Amma was the story. And who doesn't want a fairy godmother like Amma? I want her, who can just pull strings and make things happen. But what was kind of weird was people wanted Olivia. And then after the second book, they wanted more Olivia. And so it certainly was, the readers taught me more
Yeah.
than I thought that there was more to Olivia's story, as opposed to Amma, let's say Amma and Carter, or Perry and Damon, or Billy and Dulce, who I love that couple. And I think there's more to their stories as well. But Olivia was what I kept on hearing about it.
That's
So,
amazing.
So
yeah.
interesting. Well, and obviously for this book, I mean, we've hinted around at this, but you did a lot of research for this book,
Yes.
especially for the chapters from the 1800s. So can you tell us about that research and how you came to know this time and place so well?
Yes. Thank you for asking that. It's really important to me to get it right. People will tell you that even at the View, I do a lot of research. I read all the books, I watch all the movies, I go to all the plays when we have guests on. I just think research is really important. And I'm a fan of history. I'm sort of a history nerd. And I think if you don't know the past, past can become prologue pretty quickly.
Yep. Or just repeated.
Yeah, or repeated. For me, I generally hire a researcher, and I bring that person with me. And I like to be very present when I interview people. And so with Highland Beach, I asked, you almost have to ask for permission. So I met with some of the elders in the community. They invited me into their homes. I had my researcher. They did not want to be audio taped, some of them. So she was taking copious notes. And I asked a lot of questions. I think we all have griots in our families and in our communities, people that, have this wealth of information. And I got that information from them. I also did a lot of online research. I also went to the Frederick Douglass Museum, which has just so much information. And there's actually a book about Highland Beach, about Frederick Douglass, that I bought at the museum. And all those factors really taught me so much. I also spoke to Henry Louis Gates, Skip Gates, over at Harvard. And then he turned me on to a professor at Yale who is the really foremost expert on Frederick Douglass. And so I had heard a lot of rumors actually in Highland Beach, when I was visiting Highland Beach. Some of those are in the book. And I wanted to check it out. And I wanted to see if it was true or not. And Skip Gates said that is not true. And then the Yale professor also said that is not true. But I tend to believe the elders that I spoke with.
Yeah.
I tend to believe them.
Yeah.
So I leave that mystery, which I think both of you know what I'm referring to.
Yes.
I leave it to the reader,
Yeah.
because I actually believed what I learned from the community.
I believe
I
oral history. Yep.
I believed it too.
Yep.
I believe that had they had a lot of information that, had it not been true, I don't know that um, they would have been able to explain it in such detail.
Yep.
One thing that I didn't write about in the book is that one of the elders told me where a descendant lived,
Oh,
and I went to the house and I knocked on the door, and I know someone was home, and they didn't answer.
they didn't come to the door.
No, they did not.
Wow.
No, they didn't.
I
Which
love that
made
you
me
made that
believe it even more.
I know that makes me want to go round to the back door.
Yeah, it made me believe it more. Yeah.
Ah.
I love knowing.
And speaking of that, whether their story is true or someone else's story is true,
Yeah.
so much of this story hinges on hidden truths.
Yes.
From the truth about parents,
Yeah.
fathers, a mysterious
Mm-hmm.
death. So, how do you think all of these, we're going to play psychoanalyst here, how do you think all of these hidden truths and lies affected your characters' lives?
As I said earlier, I write about friends. I sort of write about myself as
Yeah.
well. There is a Afro-Latina lawyer married to an orthopedic surgeon.
Yeah.
So I write a lot about myself.
Huh.
And right. In this sense, I wrote a lot about my own family history. I had done Finding Your Roots with Skip Gates, and I had learned
Oh.
so many secrets. My mother often said that she says it to this day, you're only as sick as your secrets. And so growing up, there really weren't a lot of secrets kept from me. My parents told me everything, and I really appreciated that. What I did learn, though, from Finding Your Roots is that they didn't know everything. I found that we always knew that my grandfather was Jewish, and Sephardic Jew, which means from Spain. What we didn't know is that our entire family really came from Spain, and owned slaves. So, and had this sort of hidden family. Had no
I
idea
have to go
about that.
find this episode and watch it.
Yeah, I had no idea about that. The other thing that I found out, and this did not make the episode, is that the man that my grandmother told my father was his father was not his father. And my father had always had a very bad relationship with his father. And my father's the best father in the world. I couldn't ask for anyone better. And I asked him, how is it possible? And he said, I wanted to be everything my father was not. And so
Chills.
I wrote to that. And as it turns out, Skip found his real father, who was living, was 96 years old. The man my father thought was his father, died young. My father always thought he would die very young. Now we know he's going to probably live till he's 100 because he's in great shape. And right before we were set to go and meet him in Georgia, he died. But my father did have the opportunity to have a Zoom call with him.
Oh my God.
And my grandmother had kept that secret until she died. And my father was her primary caretaker. And he has so many questions about why she would keep that a secret. And so I wrote to that. And I knew I wanted to write about it because there are so many family secrets, not just in my family, but in every family. And I believe my mother when she says, you're only as sick as your secrets. And so I wanted to sort of write to this unfolding of secrets and how it can be not only freeing, but can, really add value to your life and make you understand why people make the decisions that they make. So it was almost sort of psychotherapy for me, just writing it. And I hope that's another takeaway for the reader, that, I really wanted to normalize mental health. I wanted to normalize seeking therapy for our traumas in childhood. So I've introduced a therapist into this book. I just thought I thought all of that was really important, and it was very intentional to include all of it.
Well, it's when you see the way that the secrets affected them, it's also this knowing that something's not right, like this deep knowing. And so you're always like, what is it? And then you don't trust yourself, and your characters weren't trusting themselves because they thought there was something wrong with them, when really it's that they didn't know the whole story.
Patti, you picked it up.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm a pretend psychoanalyst.
I mean, I will tell you what was so interesting is my father went, I had to tell him, I had to be the one to tell him that the father that he knew his whole life was not his father. That's a very difficult discussion to have. And he said, I have to sit down. When I first told him, this man was not your father. And he said, I have to sit down. My husband ran over, gave him a drink. I gave him an old bourbon drink. And he said, now I know why he never loved me.
See, it like lets you know, like these things that you feel are off, but you don't trust.
Yeah, he knew. He said he knew I wasn't his son. That's why he treated my brother better, my younger brother. And I said, how do you feel? He said, I understand. I feel good. Like he felt great about it.
Wow.
And so I think in this book, there are people now that feel complete.
Yeah.
They feel complete.
Whole.
Yeah.
The truth.
Whole. Yes, even better. Yeah.
Okay, so sorry, I'm kind of like switching gears for just a second. Okay. So we've talked a little bit about Frederick Douglass, and you've shared a little bit about why he was so important to this community in this book. But can you tell us a little bit about his wife, Anna Murray?
Yeah. I thought it was so interesting when I went into the Frederick Douglass Museum, and you see a picture of Frederick Douglass. There's really the famous picture with the sort of gray hair, right? And sort of almost profile.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just love that. And then below you saw a picture of an African-American woman, really stunning, striking woman. And then you saw pictures of like 5 kids, so many kids. And then right below it, you saw another woman, Helen Pitts, a white woman. And then it said Helen Pitts Douglass. Now, I'd never heard about a Helen Pitts Douglass, and I consider myself, I took African-American history in college, and I consider myself this history nerd. And I'm like looking like, what's going on? And I learned the story that although his first wife, Anne, was illiterate, and there was tension because you're talking about the greatest orator, right? She couldn't read anything he wrote. He would read to her, but she is the reason why he had a home to come back to. She is the reason why he had a family to come back to. And she is the reason why he got his freedom, because she was an incredible seamstress. And she is the one that tailor-made his sailor uniform that got him his freedom papers, that made people believe that he was a freeman. And so when I learned that history, and she was long suffering because some say that he took on this much younger woman who was his secretary, perhaps as a lover, perhaps not. He did marry her pretty closely after Anne died. And she was portrayed to me as long suffering. And he would soothe her by saying, but I'll read some of these books to you. And so she just reminded me of so many moms that run their homes, right? And they're stay at home, which is the hardest job in the world, because I've tried it. And it's harder than anything I've done outside of the home. And these women that hold up their families and become almost a footnote to history, when really they should be one of the main chapters. And so I wanted to make sure that she was a main character here, that she was seen for the power that she had and for what she endured, almost for our country. Our country is a better place because she took care of the Douglas family and Frederick Douglass in particular.
That's so true. That's so well said.
And it was so nice to meet her, right? It was nice to meet her.
It was just, and her picture is just, it's really striking. It's really striking. So I loved just nerding out and going around the museum. And it's a small museum, but I stayed there for hours.
Wow. That's great.
Yeah.
Well, we could talk to you all day, Sunny, but we know you have things to do. So if you'll stick around, we have one more question for you. But first, a few quick reminders for our listeners and viewers out there.
So for all of you watching and listening, we encourage you right now, at this second, to rush out and buy your copies of Summer on Highland Beach. And the perfect place to do that, and how could you not after listening to this conversation? Right. You even get to meet Ann Douglas. So the perfect place to do that is in the Friends and Fiction shop on bookshop.org, where you'll be getting the book at a discount, helping our show and supporting our guests and our beloved independent booksellers nationwide.
Yes. And we also want to remind you to follow us on Instagram and join our Facebook group, which is nearly 250,000 members strong. When you visit friendsandfiction.com, you can stay up to date about everything we have going on, and you can sign up for our weekly email newsletter, which is chock full of bonus content.
Okay. So Sunny, I love this. Salon said that you elevate the beach read. And when I read that, I was like, yeah. So I'm going to ask you, how would you define a beach read?
It is probably my favorite genre or one of my favorites, but I would describe a beach read as a getaway, my type of beach read, the ones that I write, as a getaway with a little bit of time at the museum.
Oh
right?
my gosh, I love that.
You want to sit. You want to sit at the pool and swim up to the bar and have your drink, and that's great. And you want to have your massage, but I always think there's time to go into town and visit a museum, or go into town and speak to the people in the community about their lives, or go into town and look at the artisans, and maybe help the local artisans and community and buy things. That's what I consider an elevated beach read. It's almost like trying to get your kids to eat the asparagus, but maybe you put a little honey on it. So I'm trying to, expose folks to history that perhaps aren't history nerds, and they don't really want to read a nonfiction book about Frederick Douglass, but maybe they do want to read a beach read and then take a little quick visit to the museum. That's how I look at it.
That's amazing.
Great.
I love that. All right. Well, Sunny, I'm kind of laughing asking you this question because people probably know this already about you, but in case someone out there doesn't, where can we find you online and on TV and on bookstore?
And on bookstore, yeah.
Well, for the past 8 years, you've been able to find me on ABC's The View as a co-host, along with Whoopi Goldberg and Joy Behar and Sarah Haynes and Alyssa Farrah-Griffin and Anna Navarro. Those are my girls. You can also find me online at Sunny. I don't know how I got that one.
Oh
but
gosh.
Instagram is just at Sunny. I believe most of my handles are at Sunny or at Sunny Hostin, and my website is www.sunnyhostin.com. So I'm out there if you want to find me.
That's awesome.
Amazing.
Thank you so much for being with us and talking psychoanalysis and Frederick Douglass. And this story was so enthralling. I kind of hope you write about Olivia again, even though I know we brought her full circle. It was a fascinating story. It was a pleasure, Sunny. Thank you for joining us on the Friends and Fiction Show.
Thank you. The pleasure's all mine. Thank you so much.
Yes. And be sure to tune in next week for when Mary Kay and I will welcome Annabelle Monahan to talk about her new novel, Summer Romance. That show will air on the Friends and Fiction Facebook page and YouTube channel on Wednesday, June 5th at 7 p.m. Eastern. And it will be posted to our podcast for your listening pleasure on Friday, June 7th.
Thanks to all of you out there for being with us, and we will see you next time. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you for tuning in. You can join us every week on Facebook or YouTube, where our live show airs on Wednesday nights at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Also, subscribe to our podcast and follow us on Instagram. We're so glad you're here.